Ladies and gentlemen, they always talk about accountants. In the last parliament, I'm pretty sure I was the only person who actually had practiced as an accountant, who actually had clients as an accountant. As they always say with economists, you ask an economist what 2 + 3 is and you'll get 3 different options in a theory. You ask an accountant, you'll get the answer 5. For me, it's a great joy to have the agricultural portfolio. For me, if I was talking to my department, I always try to start with just a statement that clearly spells out my views, and it's this. It's all about a better return to the farm gate. That's it. If you want to judge my opinion and where it may go, it's through the prism of a better return to the farm gate. I said in my maiden speech, and I had to give 2 of them, which is a bit of an oxymoronic process, but I did, that Cicero, 100 years before Christ, said, "Of all the occupations by which gain is secured, none is better than agriculture, none more profitable, none more delightful, none more becoming to a free man." Now, apart from the fact that it's slightly sexist in today's form, the profitability issue has become slightly of a concern. We need the capacity of people who reside on the land to be the fair benefactors of their endeavours on the land. We have to make sure we create a clear nexus between the shelf price and the paddock price. If I was to give you one clear example of the disparity, it would be this: that if you were to sell a beast in the yards for about $750, the price on the shelf of that beast is about $3,000. There's a large disparity. We can see in the dairy area that as you are buying milk for $1 a litre, recognise the fact that someone got up at 4:30 in the morning. They do that 365 days of the year, no days off. They milk twice a day. They have to create the silage. They have to be the mechanic. They have to be the farm help. They have to be the veterinarian. And for this, you get a product that you are paying less than you are at another shelf for water. Now, what is also quite peculiar about that is we've taken that product over to China in recent weeks, loaded 4,000 litres of it. And the price we got in China and Shanghai was in excess of $9 a litre. So quite obviously, there is a disparity. Quite obviously, the market forces are not working as they should. Quite obviously, we should recognise that something is not right. If there is a global market, there should be similarities between prices, or we should be giving the greatest access for people to get to that global market. We have to create a more fluid connection between our current infrastructure, our mining infrastructure, and urban infrastructure. We must have decisions driven by productivity in its purest form and not, in some instances, political necessity. We have to build greater inter-nodal access between the various ports and the population centres. It's an absurdity in this nation in 2014 that if you want to drive from east to west in this nation on a sealed road, you have 2 alternatives, and they're thousands of kilometres away from each other. You have one going through Camberwell at the north, the other one going across the Nullarbor Plain. That is it. How would China or the United States of America accept a concept like that? If you want a direct rail link between our second biggest city, Melbourne, and our third biggest city, Brisbane, which is really just the city of southeast Queensland, it's a whole area, you have to go via the first biggest city, Sydney. You have to go via a city with all its commuter requirements, with tunnels, with overhead power lines. You can't double stack containers. You have to go through a congestion point. You have to stay out for certain hours while the city runs. Once more, a complete absurdity, an absurdity that should have been fixed years ago. With mining companies, we have them building railway lines from Point Abbott, or proposed from Point Abbott near Mackay down to Alpha with private money, but we've got to have a plan of what happens to that railway line so it doesn't just become a stranded asset in legacy, that we take it the next step, that it connects up to other forms of our inter-nodal requirements of this nation. Agricultural commodities are predominantly exported, and if you want to get the best price, you must get it to a port. I believe that it is symbolic of who we are as a nation, that we have people who own the land working on the land, that it's the most fundamental unit. And I don't think it's prosaic to say that the family farm is still the fundamental core, and we should be proud of that fundamental core owning our land, because that's how it has been through history, and that's how it will be through history, and this is how it is across the globe. Our future, I believe, is not swinging off a corporate farm spanner. It's owning the land ourselves. And the most successful enterprises in farming are still family farms. I note the Harrises the other day bought Clyde Agriculture, which was formerly owned by the British for well over 100 years. We need to really focus on how we create that internodal transport infrastructure so we can start being the benefactors, true benefactors of competition at ports and getting product to the port so that we can get a better price through the farm gate. We have to also construct the seed wealth, and seed wealth is no better espoused than in dams. And I'm very happy that the Prime Minister has made me chairman of the Dams Committee. If you look at where our wealth is, as an example, where I used to live, St George. In St George, you had the seed capital of what was an 89,000 meg dam, and what was initially built for fat lambs, and they all went broke, but what it did develop into a cotton industry that produced around about three quarters to 2/3 of $1 billion renewable income a year in the district. The vast majority in the future built from private enterprise, but you had to have the seed capital as the instigator of further development. And this is why we must acknowledge that if we are to take this nation forward, we must build new dams. We must not just reside in the complacency that we live in a place where it's as good as it gets. We have to take the next step, and we have to be prepared for the challenges of taking that next step. And those people who will sit and turn up dressed up as koala bears and a whole range of other things and screech and scream because basically they'll never be happy. We've got to be prepared that we are going to move forward. We delude ourselves that if we think that it's just the fact that we produce food that we'll succeed. I'll give you a couple of examples in case there. We produce cattle and we think of ourselves in our iconic form as people sitting on a horse driving a herd of cattle. But we have to acknowledge that China produces 4 times as many cattle as us. India produces 8 times as many cattle as us, and Brazil produces 8 times as many. Even in the cattle industry, which we pride ourselves on, we're not, if you really line ourselves up, a major player. What we do produce, though, is a premium product. And if we can produce a premium product, we can get a premium price. But stop thinking we're going to be the food bowl of Asia. Every time I hear that, I think it's an incredibly naive statement, because you're not going to be the food bowl of Asia. You're going to be part of a componentry of food within Asia, which, if you are smart enough, you can produce a premium product and get a premium price. When you just look at it, we feed about 60 million people. If we double, it's 120 million people. Look at where the world's going. You're going to have about 4 billion of them in Southeast Asia. So stop thinking you're going to feed them all. So what have we done? What have we done thus far? And as an accountant, you always want to be judged by your record. Since we've been there, and I say it's we because it's a team effort, but we've opened up the Bahrain market. We've opened up the Egyptian market, and I have to say here on the record, I'm very disappointed about the decision with Peter Gress, and I hope and pray that there's some resolution there. And I did bring that up with the Egyptian ambassador when we're trying to get the Egyptian market opened up. You know, it's something I think that needs to happen. We've made I've made my first trip not to England to see the Queen or to see the President of the United States, but to Saudi Arabia, because the Middle East is one of our vital export destinations. And we've got to grow that market, and we've got to be aware of that market and aware of the sensitivities in that market. We've got good grass-fed sets, which are, for those who are not in the know, that's cattle without their skins and without a lot of other bits and pieces, hanging on a hook upside down. In the first time in 4 decades, we've opened up the Iranian market again. And this has reflected itself in real changes in people's lives. I noted the other day with this. Sheep hit $158 a head in Western Australia. $158 a head. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what that means is they're making money. For the first time in their life, they're making money. It means we've actually made a difference in their lives. Actually made a difference. It's a real, tangible outcome in their lives. And that's a good thing. That's what we're here for. That's what we're paid for. But there are other things that I wish to sort of basically give my report back to basically how we're going. Live cattle to Indonesia. September 12 to April, September to April 13 last year, they moved 165,000 head. In the year since we've been there, we've moved 426,000 head, up 158%. Live cattle, we've almost doubled, 305,000 to 700,000 head. Live sheep, 1.3 million to 1.4 million. Beef and veal from 659,000 tonnes to 768,000 tonnes. Sheep meat, 234,000 tonnes to 286,000 tonnes. We're moving more product. That's what they pay accountants to do. That's why they put us in business, to move product, to make the business work, to turn a buck. If you look at the overall results of how we're going, March quarter, 12-13, 8.7 billion in my portfolio. March quarter, 12-13, 14, 10.4 billion. We've increased it by 19.3%. Now, you're business people. You'd be happy with that. If I put that across your table, you'd say we're going all right, wouldn't you? But we've still got more to do. We've still got a lot more to do. We've been part of a process of moving out concessional loans. With concessional loans, where we now have a book of around about of access to $700 million. $700 million, 420 at 4.5%, 280 at 4%. And you would say, why? Why would you do that? Why would you compete with the banks? Well, here's another thing. This is from JPS, this is from JP Morgan. And it came out last night, you probably saw it on the ABC News, where the margins for the banks now have gone from about less than 2% to just shy of 4%. Now, good luck to them, but we need to be competitive stress in that marketplace. We need to make sure that people in the land are getting access to a fair price of capital, because it's fundamental if we want to grow this section, reinvest in this section. And we're never intending to take over from banks, we're never intending to set up a development bank, but we do intend to make sure that the competitive stresses are there, because we've got to make sure that our people get fair access to capital at a fair price, and that we get there's always a sign, a market sign, that if you go too far, that there is a role for people to try and drag you back into the marketplace at a fair price. But the government now has also put forward in excess of $20 million for water infrastructure for low-level bores to get a greater coverage of land. We've even started dealing with an issue that people have forgotten about for so long, and that's control of wild dogs. And so many times you hear people and they snigger and say, oh, wild dogs, why would you worry about that? Because they've shut down the sheep industry in Western Queensland. That's one good reason. And they're starting to shut down the sheep industry in whole sections that are adjacent to parks. That's another good reason. And because people, because they don't see it, don't recognise it, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing something about it. And there's another good reason. But we've actually moved into that space, and we're pushing the states into that space as well. We've put money on the table to deal with mental health issues so that we make sure we show our compassion as well for those who, because you are so, your lives are adjacent to services they just don't get in regional areas. You're adjacent to hospitals, multiple schools. Sometimes we've got to make sure that people who live in isolation under the privacy and sometimes duress of the financial conditions that are currently seen in many areas of the land, that we look after these people. We've put more than $100 million into research and development because we note that we have to be at the forefronts of plant and animal genetics. We have to be at the forefront of farm practices. As part of over $700 million a year the federal government puts towards research and development. Even in matching funding through levies, it's over $250 million a year. These are vitally important. As I said, we are not going to survive in this space unless we have the capacity to deliver a premium product to the market. So, apart from the Dams Committee, we also, and I just want to maybe go further with the Dams Committee. I believe that we can build new dams that are going to work on the back of other industries. Dams that we build with an offtake to the mining industry to get that cash flow to construct them, but also have an advantage to agriculture. Dams that we build for hydroelectricity. It is not an evil word. Hydroelectricity, but there is also an offtake and an advantage to agriculture. Dams that we build for flood mitigation, but there is also an offtake for agriculture. I understand that dams that you build just purely for agriculture, it's hard to get the financing package right, hard to create the annuity, hard to create that mechanism to do it. But if you work with other industries, you can, and we are doing that. And we have, and I know of access to capital, and I'm searching for how we do it. I will present to the Prime Minister in short form a list of a range of dams and funding alternatives. This is going to be how we take the next step. And my most recent conversation with the Prime Minister is he wants real dams built, not just extensions, but big new dams. Substantive projects that give the Australian people a reason to take us to the next term, a reason for us to build on the agenda we have. And this is going to be part of that vision that we have that takes our nation forward. There are so many areas, and I've received information back from local members about the Apsley Dam, about near Walker, my local area, Mitchell, down in Victoria, Ord River extension, on the Fitzroy River in northwest Western Australia, Hell's Gate, Burdekin. These are all things. It's a shame when you look into the past and see the vision of our nation in the past and how we are so, sometimes I'd have to say, scared of our shadow in the future. If we try to build the Snowy Mountains scheme at the moment, imagine the protests we would have. Imagine it would just be pandemonium. It would be the end of the world. But somehow, back in the 1950s, we had the vision and the courage to do it. And we've got to get that vision and that courage back, because we are a better people and we have a better place to go. This is not the end. This is merely the interlude before our next step. We also have currently at foot the white paper. We've received over 670 submissions to the white paper, one of the most responded to white papers in agriculture of any white paper that the nation has put forward. That's because the Australian people, and they don't have to be on the land, are talking to us about where they want agriculture in this nation to go. They want to be part of that vision. They want to express how they're going to be part of that vision. And also people in associated industries, from banking right through to the agricultural sector, to people on the land, to engineers. They all have a vision for agriculture because they all, in a deep kernel of their heart, have that vision and that desire to take the next step. But we must also understand some of the anomalies that have grown in our nation over a range of years. In so many areas, agriculture works to a natural monopoly because you're only going to build one railway line. You're not going to build 5 railway lines with five different above rail componentries. You're not going to build 5 different ports, you'll build one. You'll build one railway line to one port. And you won't have 5 different milk processors in an area, you'll have one. So it works its way towards a natural monopoly status. In the past, this was dealt with and it was not really a concern because so many of those monopoly positions were held by cooperatives. So whatever they exploited, they returned back to the people who delivered to them, and it was a fair deal. Now, by reason of the natural tendency that all human beings have to greed, people see that the best thing to do to corporatise, you can make a lot of money out of corporatising a monopoly, corporatising a cooperative. These cooperatives have been corporatised, and then, of course, what you then have is a person with a completely different motivation with a holding of a virtual monopoly power. And we've got to call this for what it is. In our discussions in the I wish in some instances we had the powers they have in the United Kingdom, because they have greater market survey powers and they also have the judicial power to enforce an outcome from that survey process. I think in Australia, and without prejudice statement, I think we need to look, and we also have the Competition Consumer Act review going, we need to look closely at our Section 155 powers of how we examine exactly what's going on in some of these areas. We also have to make note of Section 46 and Section 47 powers in what was the Trade Practice Act, now the Competition Consumer Act. We have to also acknowledge that America, which I believe is hardly the bastion of communism, but they have vastly greater powers in dealing in this space than we do. They have the Sherman Act, they have the Clayton's Act. They really have a mind for small business. They really have a mind for small business. So does the United Kingdom. They really have a mind for small business. And I've even seen now in some of the cursory powers in China, they're starting to really focus on making sure that small business survives. From my side of the political fence, we are small business. That's what we're supposed to be. That is supposed to be the blood that runs through our veins more than anything else. To quote a person who is not from my ilk, but from my colleagues' ilk in the Liberal Party, you always make sure you look after small business because big business is big enough to look after itself. So this is also going to be extremely important in this agricultural section of how we basically take the next step. There's also a range of other things, and every time someone sees me, they talk about foreign investment, so I'll just quickly clear that one up. I believe in foreign investment. I believe in foreign investment. But I believe in foreign investment is where there's nothing and you create something. That is investment. Well, like what we're doing in stage 2 of the Ord. Where there is nothing and you create something, that is good. Where you build something that was not, that is good. But we've got to also acknowledge that right now in our nation, 12% of our farmland is foreign owned. Okay, I'm not saying stop it, but just got to acknowledge it. If that was housed in the street, 1 in every 8 houses is owned by somebody else from overseas. which means the first thing we want is transparency. We want to know clearly exactly where we are. And we must enact, and we will enact, our election commitment of changing the threshold limits of $15 million for private individuals, $53 for agribusinesses, and $1 for state-owned enterprises. This is because it's asked of us by the Australian people, and they are ultimately our shareholder, and we must reflect that. But to review something doesn't mean you're stopping it. To review something just means you're reviewing it. Sometimes it is always annoying when it's somehow thrown as a pejorative that because you review one, because you have an exception to one, therefore you're a xenophobe. No, therefore you're diligent. Therefore you're prudent, because that's how, in any business, you ultimately survive. So if it's not just in Northern Australia, if it's not the white paper, if it's not the Dams Committee, it is the actual results that we have delivered thus far. I look forward to being part of a government that I think that in this space we have already made major changes, and we have a major program, and we have a major vision for this nation. All the best, and God bless.